The Houthi rebels just got wrecked. The US military hit them with an all-out onslaught and they didn't stand a chance. These Iran-backed fighters thought they could control the Red Sea, but now their bases are getting leveled, their weapons destroyed, their grip gone. This is the US military at full power. Fast, brutal, relentless. And it's only the beginning. What's coming next is even bigger, deadlier. Let's go back to where it all started. On March 15th, the US kicked off its opening strike, a targeted air assault on Sana'a, the heart of Houthi control in Yemen. This wasn't just about hitting the capital. Sana'a is located approximately 100 miles from the border with Saudi Arabia, which made it the perfect first target. And there's more to it than just geography. Saudi Arabia has become Trump's neutral zone, a strategic buffer as he tries to broker a peace deal between Putin and Zelensky to end the Ukraine war. By striking Houthi bases near the border, Trump isn't just responding to attacks, he's clearing the board for future negotiations. But that was only the beginning. The Houthis later confirmed multiple explosions in both Sana'a and Sadr, another one of their key strongholds. Then images surfaced, broadcast by the BBC, showing thick smoke rising from Sana'a's airport. That's a big deal, because this airport shares a runway with the Al Dailama Air Base, one of the most fortified military hubs in Yemen. It's packed with aviation brigades, the 2nd, 4th, 6th, and 8th, all elite air defense units. And here's the thing, this base has been on the hit list for years. Between March 2015 and January 2022, it was bombed 154 times by Saudi-led coalition forces, adding up to 456 individual airstrikes, all hammering either the base or the airport next to it. But that was then. In January 2024, the US and UK joined the action. They launched fresh airstrikes on Houthi targets, including the Al Dailama base. And on January 13th, the US followed up with a cruise missile that obliterated radar systems at the airport. This wasn't just another warning shot, it was a precision takedown. And now, Trump may have taken the whole base offline. The Houthis released an initial statement, deriding the US for what it called its wicked aggression. However, nobody can argue with the effectiveness of the initial strikes. By the end of the first day of attacks, the Yemeni Health Ministry, which is controlled by the Houthis, reported that at least 31 were dead and a further 101 had been injured by the US's initial wave of attacks. And the US wasn't alone in these first strikes. Though no other country participated in the aerial assaults directly, the BBC reports that the UK provided routine refueling support for American planes. It helped to keep those aircraft in the sky, ensuring that Trump's initial attacks maintained the level of pressure the US hoped to achieve. The US was just getting started. The next day brought with it fresh US strikes in Yemen. On March 16th, the US attacked targets in the Judaiya and Al Jauf areas of the country. As the US expanded the scope of its airstrikes, the death toll rose. Yemen's health ministry reported that there were 53 dead, including 5 children, and dozens more injured by the end of the March 16th attacks. Washington lauded this second wave of strikes. US National Security Advisor Mike Waltz told ABC News that the strikes targeted multiple Houthi leaders and took them out. He also spoke to Fox News, adding, "We just hit them with overwhelming force and put Iran on notice that enough is enough." In other words, the US just told Iran to stop using the Houthis as a proxy to conduct raids in the Red Sea. More on that later. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was equally bullish about the initial 2 days of strikes, stating that the US planned to unleash an unrelenting campaign until the Houthi rebels stop their attacks. "I want to be very clear," Hegseth said during an interview with Fox News. "This campaign is about freedom of navigation and restoring deterrence." As for Trump, he addressed the Houthis directly, proclaiming, "Hell will rain down upon you like nothing you have ever seen before." He may have been right. The BBC reports that one father of 2, named only as Ahmed, told AFP News that Trump's threat was bang on the money. "I've been living in Sana'a for 10 years, hearing shelling throughout the war. By God, I've never experienced anything like this before." But despite the overwhelming force of these initial attacks, the Houthis claimed that they weren't going to back down. The group's leader, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, said that his militant group would continue to target US and Western ships in the Red Sea for as long as the US continued carrying out its attacks in Yemen. Iran was equally defensive, with its foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, posting on X to tell the US that it had no business attempting to influence Iranian foreign policy by attacking the Houthis. "End support for Israeli genocide and terrorism," he said. "Stop the killing of Yemeni people." The Houthis also claimed to have conducted a counterattack of their own. By March 18th, the group was saying that it had unleashed 3 attacks against US warships, including the USS Harry S. Truman, over the previous 48 hours. It claimed to have struck the ship with missiles and drones. though the US quickly denied that the Houthi attacks made any sort of impact. A US defense official said the group continues to communicate lies and disinformation, and that it is well known for false claims, minimizing the results of our attacks while exaggerating the success of theirs. Apparently, this wave of Houthi attacks is hard to confirm, says US Air Force Lieutenant General Alexis Grinkovich. Why? The Houthis were missing their targets by over 100 miles, the US Air Force veteran claimed. One of the 3 attacks, reportedly launched on March 16th in the wake of the US's initial airstrikes, resulted in warplanes shooting down 11 Houthi drones. The US didn't comment directly on the supposed second and third strikes, with only Grinkovich offering any indicator that they happened at all. 2 things are for sure. The USS Harry S. Truman still sails, and the US has continued its attacks against Houthi strongholds. Fast forward to March 24th, and the US strikes continued over Sana'a. This latest attack again targeted Yemen's capital, with Al Jazeera reporting that it killed at least 1 person and injured another 13 in the city. Footage released by the Houthis appears to show the rubble of collapsed buildings and pools of blood all over the ground, claims the outlet. The Houthis themselves gave more details. They say the US struck Sada, which is the Houthis' main stronghold, along with the Marib province and Hodeidah, which is a port city that leads out into the Red Sea. That later attack is important. By taking out a port, the US limits the Houthis' ability to send their pirating ships out to attack Western commercial vessels. For its part, the US didn't confirm any specific strikes. However, a defense official said that CENTCOM, or US Central Command, conducting strikes against multiple locations of Iran-backed Houthi locations every day and night in Yemen. That means there wasn't a pause between the initial 15th and 16th strikes and the ones that came on March 24th. The bombardments have been constant. They'd also been effective, according to Waltz. We've hit their headquarters, we've hit communications nodes, weapons factories, and even some of their over-the-water drone production facilities. While the Houthis claim that this is all complete lie and slander, the reality seems to be that this triple tap against the group's most valuable bases is being accompanied by an aerial siege against targets in key Houthi strongholds. By March 24th, the death toll was 79 people, with over 100 injured, according to the Houthi-controlled Ministry of Defense. And the US still shows no signs of stopping. On March 25th, more airstrikes targeting the Houthi rebels battered locations across Yemen, with one attack in Sana'a resulting in the deaths of at least 2 people and injury to dozens more. And again, the US believes it's hit more valuable targets. Waltz says they've taken out key Houthi leadership, including their head missileer. Again, the Houthis haven't acknowledged any of this. Instead, Houthi-controlled news stations are claiming that the US strikes are actually targeting residential areas. The Times of Israel reports that March 25th also saw the US launch airstrikes against the Sahar district. For their part, the Houthis claim that they're fighting back. On March 24th, the militants said they'd been involved in an hours-long exchange of fire with the US Navy in the Red Sea. Houthi spokesman Yahya Sari said, "This combat, the second in 24 hours, lasted for several hours, during which an enemy air attack against our country was thwarted. That seems unlikely." Less than 24 hours after Sari made the claim, more US missiles and bombs were being dropped in Sana'a. It all adds up to a devastating 11-day assault by the US that's still ongoing. And if Waltz is accurate, the US has taken out multiple key targets. The Houthis' main airport has gone up in smoke, its headquarters is decimated, along with a command center, and multiple members of its leadership team have fallen to the US in its aerial assault. All the Houthis have managed to conjure up in response is repeated claims of attacks on the USS Harry S. Truman, from which most of the US strikes originate. But those reports are spurious, with the US claiming that the Houthis are missing their targets by miles. We don't even know if the Houthis' latest claim of exchanging gunfire with the US Navy are true. The US hasn't confirmed the showdown. What we do know is that the US isn't stopping, and it certainly isn't holding back its attacks against the Houthis. The question now is simple: why launch the attacks in the first place? Well, there are several reasons. The primary concern, at least from the US standpoint, is the situation that the Houthis have created in the Red Sea. Reuters provides the details in a March 25th report examining the conflict in detail. It says that the Houthis have been a problem in Yemen for at least the last decade, having taken control of most of the country via an armed movement. Since November 2023, the group has targeted commercial ships sailing through the Red Sea, launching more than 100 attacks from the Yemeni coast in assaults it claims to be conducting in support of the Hamas militants fighting against Israel in Gaza. The attacks have been effective. The Red Sea is one of the world's most vital routes for commercial vessels, with World Bank pointing out that around 30% of the globe's container traffic passes through the waterway annually. At least it did. By the end of March 2024, less than 6 months after the Houthis started their Red Sea assaults, the volume of container traffic passing through the Suez Canal and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, both of which connect to the Red Sea, had dropped by around 50%. In contrast, traffic via the Cape of Good Hope saw a 100% increase in navigation, suggesting that commercial shipping companies were being forced to divert their vessels. That's a problem, as the US Energy Information Administration points out. It highlights the impact that avoiding the Red Sea has on shipping companies. Container vessels sailing from the US Gulf Coast to China take 44 days to arrive at their destination if they're able to pass through the Suez Canal, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and the Red Sea on their route. Diverting around the Cape of Good Hope to avoid the Houthis, 4 days to that journey. It's even worse for a route that takes ships from Rotterdam to the Arabian Sea. When the Red Sea is clear, container vessels require just 19 days to make that journey, because they're able to pass through the Mediterranean and essentially cut out Africa. Now that the Houthis are attacking vessels in the Red Sea, those sailing from Rotterdam require 34 days to make it around the Cape of Good Hope into the Arabian Sea. Reuters provides some more figures. It says that 2024 saw traffic sailing through the Suez Canal decline by 75% in 2024 alone, with transit times increasing by an average of between 7 and 14 days. In short, the Houthis are forcing shipping companies to take longer routes, which messes up global supply chains and costs these companies billions of dollars per year. Worse yet, the Houthis have been sinking and capturing the vessels that do try to make it through the Red Sea. Up until the US launched its devastating airstrikes, the group had managed to sink 2 vessels, killing at least 4 sailors in the process. By February 2024, the group had attacked at least 40 vessels, with the numbers likely moving into the hundreds since then. The Houthis' Red Sea assaults have affected at least 85 countries, according to Reuters, in addition to 29 major energy and shipping companies that relied on the Red Sea for transportation of their products. While most of the ships targeted are owned by European countries, the US is getting involved because at least 8 of the vessels the Houthis attacked were owned by American firms. And they just haven't stopped. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I would have been more optimistic on when it will open, said Hapag-Lloyd CEO Rolf Haben Janssen during a 2024 earnings presentation after the US conducted initial strikes against the Houthis in the Red Sea. Now I'm more concerned, and he had every reason to be. Despite the 2024 US strikes, the Houthis continued attacking, creating a cascading impact that led to the shipping diversions we discussed earlier. Fast forward to the most recent US strikes, and we also have a report from March 12th that says the Houthis threatened that any Israeli vessel found sailing through Mideast waters would be a target. That threat threw the entire Red Sea situation back into chaos, with concerns that they would once again affect shipping between Europe and Asia. Egypt was worried about revenue generated by the Suez Canal, which was only just starting to recover from the Houthi strikes in 2023 and 24. Plus, Houthi attacks on what they believe to be Israeli ships could also potentially stop the flow of aid shipments into war-torn Gaza and Israel. Add to all of this that the Houthis often play fast and loose with their definition of an Israeli ship, essentially targeting any Western vessel that comes into their sights. And you have the immediate reason why the US just launched its wave of airstrikes in Yemen. The Houthis were threatening the Red Sea again. The US decided to get ahead of the issue rather than react to it this time around. However, there's another reason why the US is so intent on targeting the Houthis in Yemen. It has nothing to do with clearing up their influence in the country, though that would be a bonus. Instead, we've offered hints about what the US wants to achieve already. Remember the comments Waltz made to Fox News in the wake of the initial US airstrikes? He said, "We just hit them with overwhelming force and put Iran on notice that enough is enough." In other words, the attacks on the Houthis aren't really focused on clearing Houthi influence at all. The problem for the US, as it has been all along, is that Iran is using the Houthis as a proxy to achieve its goals in the Middle East. We get suggestions of this from the Houthis' renewed March 12 threats to start launching attacks against Israeli ships. A statement released by the militant group said, "We hope it's understood that the actions taken by the Houthi military stem from a deep sense of religious, humanitarian, and moral responsibility toward the oppressed Palestinian people, and aim to pressure the Israeli usurper entity to reopen the crossings to the Gaza Strip and allow the entry of aid, including food and medical supplies." It's the same reasoning the Houthis have used all along. And to the US, it amounts to this. Iran supports Hamas in Gaza, and it's using the Houthis to try and control the situation between Hamas and Israel. There's plenty of evidence to support the connection between Iran and the Houthis. The Council on Foreign Relations calls Iran the Houthis' primary benefactor. It says the Iranian regime provides the Yemeni group with security assistance, which includes training, intelligence support, and even weapons. That much was made clear in January 2024 when the US Navy intercepted a shipment of missile warheads, drone parts, and anti-tank missiles that was en route from Iran to Yemen. These military aid packages prop up the Houthis as they attempt to take full control of Yemen. That also enables the group's constant attacks in the Red Sea. Through their connection with Iran, the Houthis gain access to advanced weapons they would never have been able to source themselves. In exchange, the Houthis act as a constant menace to Saudi Arabia near its border with Yemen. Plus, when Iran needs a group to support its Middle East agenda, such as during Israel's conflict with Hamas, it can call on the Houthis to wage terror campaigns without getting directly involved. That's what we're seeing in the Red Sea. The Houthis have their own agenda, of course. Gaining control over the Red Sea would help to cement their position in Yemen, but Iran is the real threat, at least to the US. So, March airstrikes against the Houthis may be less about restoring vital shipping routes and more about ensuring that Iran isn't able to gain the level of influence over a key waterway that it wants to achieve via the Houthis. As for the future, we can only assume that the US airstrikes will continue in Yemen until the US gets what it wants: the elimination of the Houthis as a threat. That seems to be Trump's implication, as he says that the US is standing up to terrorism and protecting international commerce. Trump also points out that the Houthis have launched 145 attacks against US commercial vessels since 2023, along with 174 attacks against US Navy ships. The US wants to stop those attacks, limiting Iranian influence and opening up the Red Sea to trade once more. Between March 15th and March 26th, it showcased just how devastating it can be. But what do you think about the US airstrikes in Yemen? Will they ultimately lead to the eradication of the Houthi threat as the US targets the militants' leadership and key bases? Or will the Houthis survive and continue to wreak havoc in the Red Sea? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section and subscribe to The Military Show for up-to-date commentary on the Red Sea situation.